The colony of Eldera Prime was burning. Shattered glass crunched beneath Lucas Drake's boots as he sprinted through the chaos, his breath ragged. The once thriving settlement, nestled in the shadow of copper-hued mountains, now lay in ruins beneath a crimson sky. Sargathian drones swarmed overhead, their mechanical hum mingling with the cries of terrified colonists. Lucas clutched a data pad to his chest, its screen flickering with schematics for a half-repaired evacuation shuttle. "Come on, we can't wait any longer!" he shouted to the group of colonists huddled behind a crumbling wall. The evac shuttle's engine sputtered weakly on the landing pad a few hundred meters away, its shields barely holding against the relentless barrage from the Sargathians. "We're not leaving without you!" a woman's voice called, defiant yet strained. Lucas turned, his 16-year-old face set with determination that belied his years. "I'll catch up. I need to fix the stabilizer, or this thing won't even make it out of the atmosphere." Before anyone could argue, Lucas darted toward the shuttle, weaving through rubble and dodging laser fire. The acrid scent of scorched metal filled the air. He slid under the ship's belly, his fingers trembling as he worked to repair the stabilizer module. Sparks rained down as he adjusted the wires, every second a battle against time. "Just a little longer," he whispered to himself, ignoring the pounding of his heart. Above him, the Sargathian soldiers advanced with mechanical precision, their towering forms clad in biometal armor that glimmered ominously in the firelight. One of them, a squad commander with a jagged crest on his helmet, raised a clawed hand. "Eliminate all resistance. Leave no survivors." Lucas didn't see them approach until it was too late. The stabilizer clicked into place just as he heard the cold, guttural voice behind him. "You dare defy the Sargathian Empire?" He spun around, eyes wide, but his words were lost in the roar of a plasma rifle. Evelyn Drake stared at the holographic display in the war room aboard Sanctuary, the Resistance's last bastion deep in the nebula drift. Her sharp blue eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, darted across the map as reports of Sargathian activity poured in. The edges of her lips tightened into a grim line. "General, we've lost contact with Eldera Prime," Captain Joran Malik said, his voice low. Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She pressed a button, and a flickering transmission filled the room. The image was faint, distorted by interference, but the voice was unmistakable. "Mom, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it." Lucas's voice, calm yet laced with urgency, echoed through the chamber. "The Sargathians are here. I'm trying to help as many as I can. The message cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Evelyn's breath hitched, her composure cracking for the briefest moment. "Run it again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "General!" "Again, Captain!" she snapped, her tone sharp enough to silence any protest. The transmission replayed, each word carving into her like a blade. When it ended, she stood motionless, her hands clenched into fists. The silence in the room was suffocating. Joran hesitated before speaking. "Evelyn, we need you. The Resistance needs you." Her head snapped up, and the icy resolve in her eyes returned. "They'll pay for this," she said, her voice like steel. "Every last one of them." Hours later, Evelyn stood before the gathered Resistance fighters in the station's cavernous hangar bay. The air buzzed with tension, the faces before her a mix of determination and fear. "Today, we've been reminded of what we're fighting for," Evelyn began, her voice steady and commanding. "The Sargathians think they can crush us, that humanity is weak. They killed my son. They killed your families. But they've made one fatal mistake." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "They've underestimated us." The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices echoing through the hangar. Evelyn's heart ached, but she buried her grief beneath layers of resolve. Joran approached her as the crowd dispersed, his expression one of concern. "Are you sure you're ready for this? You've barely had a moment to process." "There's no time for that," Evelyn interrupted. "Lucas knew what was at stake. He believed in this fight, and so will I." Joran nodded, his respect for her unwavering. "What's the plan, General?" Evelyn's lips curled into a grim smile. "We hit them where it hurts. Supply routes, communication hubs, anything to weaken their grip. And we start with the convoy passing through the Epsilon corridor tonight. The Resistance fleet, a patchwork of salvaged human ships bristling with makeshift weaponry, emerged from hyperspace near the Epsilon corridor. Evelyn sat in the command chair of the Resolute, her eyes fixed on the Sargathian convoy ahead. Targets locked, Joran reported from the weapons console. Engage, Evelyn ordered, her voice calm and resolute. The first volley of fire streaked through the void, catching the Sargathian ships off guard. Explosions erupted as the Resistance fighters swarmed, their nimble ships darting around the hulking Sargathian vessels. Direct hit on their lead ship, Joran called out. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. Keep up the pressure. Don't let them regroup. The battle was chaotic, a deadly dance of lasers and plasma. Evelyn's mind worked at lightning speed, issuing orders and adjusting tactics with precision. Her grief fueled her determination, every decision a step closer to avenging Lucas. As the last Sargathian ship exploded, the Resistance fighters let out a triumphant cheer. Evelyn allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, but her resolve remained unshaken. This is just the beginning, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. The Resolute turned back towards Sanctuary, the stars stretching into streaks of light as they entered hyperspace. Evelyn closed her eyes, Lucas's voice echoing in her mind. I'll make them pay, Lucas, she whispered. For you. For all of us. High Commander Zareth Kell stood before the holographic war map in the Sargathian command ship Aegis Imperium. His towering, biometal-clad form radiated an aura of arrogance as he studied the latest reports. On the map, the human territories appeared as scattered patches of resistance, insignificant compared to the Empire's vast dominion. Yet, recent rebel activity irritated him, like a small splinter in an otherwise perfect machine. The humans grow bolder, Zareth mused, his voice a deep, guttural rumble. A junior officer, her face concealed beneath the smooth metallic plating of her helmet, stepped forward. Yes, High Commander. Their raids have disrupted 3 supply lines in the last week. Zareth dismissed her concerns with a wave of his clawed hand. Futile. These primitives lack the discipline or resources to pose a real threat. Their defiance only hastens their annihilation. The officer hesitated before speaking again. There is one matter that requires your attention. Our engineers report that Exterminus is nearly operational. It could neutralize the human colonies in one decisive strike. Zareth's crust-like head tilted, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Excellent. Prepare for a demonstration. Let them witness the futility of resistance before they are erased. On the Rebel Space Station Sanctuary, Evelyn Drake stood at the center of the strategy room, her sharp gaze fixed on the scattered reports of recent resistance victories. She wore her grief like armor, each success against the Sargathians a step closer to vengeance. Captain Joran Malik entered, carrying a datapad. General, the latest intel from the Epsilon corridor raid. Evelyn took the datapad and scanned the details. The raid had been a success, crippling a major supply route, but the Sargathian response had been swift. Reinforcements were already moving to fortify their remaining supply lines. This isn't enough, Evelyn said, her voice low but firm. We need to hit them harder, force them to overextend. Joran frowned. Easier said than done. Our resources are stretched thin, and the Sargathians are adapting to our tactics. Before Evelyn could respond, a young communications officer burst into the room. General! We've intercepted a high-priority Sargathian transmission. It's heavily encrypted, but our analysts believe it contains plans for a new weapon. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. A weapon? Yes, ma'am. From what we can gather, it's something massive, planetary scale. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Evelyn's mind raced. If the Sargathians had developed a superweapon, humanity's survival would hang by a thread. We need details, Evelyn said. Where's the transmission origin? The officer hesitated. A research facility in the Arcanes asteroid belt. It's heavily fortified, But we might be able to infiltrate it with a small team. Evelyn nodded, her resolve hardening. Then that's our next move. Joran, assemble a strike team. I want this done quietly and efficiently. Meanwhile, within the resistance ranks, tension brewed. In the mess hall, Lieutenant Rena Vallis leaned against the table, her arms crossed as she glared at Evelyn's retreating figure. She's going to get us all killed, Rena muttered. Sergeant Orrin Hale, an older soldier with a grizzled demeanor, raised an eyebrow. Watch your mouth, Vallis. General Drake's the only reason we're still standing. Rena's frustration boiled over. Is she? Or is this about avenging her son? I've seen her push us into riskier and riskier missions. What happens when one of them goes wrong? Orrin sighed. She's grieving, sure. But don't mistake her grief for recklessness. If you've got doubts, take them to her face. Rena hesitated, then nodded. She marched out of the mess hall, determination in her stride. Evelyn was in the observation deck, staring out at the distant stars. The vast expanse of space usually calmed her, but tonight it felt cold and oppressive. General, Rena said, stepping forward. Evelyn didn't turn. Lieutenant Vallis. Something on your mind? Rena took a deep breath. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted. Rena hesitated before continuing. I respect you, General. But I can't help feeling like this is personal. We're all here because we've lost someone, but if you're leading us into battles for revenge, I need to know. Evelyn turned to face her, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Rena thought she'd overstepped. Then Evelyn spoke, her voice steady but laced with emotion. You're right, Lieutenant. This is personal. But it's not just about my son. The Sargathians have taken everything from us, our homes, our families, our future. If we don't fight back, there won't be anything left to avenge. Rena's stance softened. I just needed to hear it, ma'am. Evelyn nodded. Good. Now I need you focused. We're heading into the lion's den, and I need soldiers I can count on. The strike team departed Sanctuary aboard the stealth frigate Shadowfall, its engines designed to evade Sargathian sensors. The Arcani's asteroid belt loomed ahead, its jagged rocks casting ominous shadows across the void. Evelyn and her team, clad in black combat suits, prepared for the mission in the ship's briefing room. Our target is a research facility hidden in one of the larger asteroids, Evelyn said, pointing to the holographic map. Our primary objective is to retrieve intel on their new weapon. Secondary objective, sabotage if possible. This is a stealth operation. No unnecessary risks. Joran smirked. Define unnecessary, General. Evelyn allowed herself a faint smile. You'll know it when you see it, Captain. The Shadowfall slipped through the asteroid field, avoiding detection with precision maneuvers. When they reached the facility, the strike team exited via a docking port, their magnetic boots clinging to the surface of the asteroid. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet, its corridors bathed in sterile white light. The team moved in formation, their weapons ready. Evelyn's voice came through the comms. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into. They reached the central data core without incident, but as Joran began extracting files, an alarm blared. Damn it! Joran hissed. They've detected us. Evelyn's instincts kicked in. Defensive positions. Hold them off while we get the data. Sargathian guards poured into the room, their plasma rifles blazing. The rebels fought with brutal efficiency, their desperation fueling every shot. Got it! Joran shouted, holding up a data chip. Move! Evelyn barked. The team retreated, navigating the maze-like corridors under heavy fire. Explosions rocked the facility as they planted charges along the way, each detonation a step closer to their escape. As they boarded the Shadowfall, Evelyn glanced back at the facility, now engulfed in flames. She clenched her fists, her resolve stronger than ever. Let's see what they're hiding, she said, her voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. The frigate vanished into the asteroid field, leaving destruction in its wake. The stakes had never been higher. The Shadowfall glided into the docking bay of Sanctuary, its hull marred with scorches from the firefight. Evelyn Drake stepped off the ship, her body aching from the mission's intensity, but her mind racing with questions. In her hand, she clutched the small dated chip that had cost lives to retrieve. Joran followed close behind, removing his helmet and running a hand through his disheveled hair. "We lost 2 good people back there," he said quietly. Evelyn paused, her jaw tightening. "I know. And I'll make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain." In the command center, the room buzzed with energy as analysts worked to decrypt the data. Evelyn leaned over the shoulder of a young technician, her impatience barely masked. The lines of code scrolled across the screen, and then suddenly, a schematic appeared. The room fell silent. "What is that?" Joran asked, leaning closer. The technician swallowed hard. "It's a weapon platform, planetary in scale. They call it Exterminus." The hologram expanded, showing a massive orbital structure armed with enough firepower to annihilate entire colonies in a single strike. Evelyn's stomach twisted as the implications hit her. "They've built a doomsday weapon," she said, her voice cold. "This is their endgame." Joran frowned. "There's more. Look." The display highlighted a series of power cores, each marked as critical components of the weapon's operation. The technician zoomed in on the largest core, nestled deep within the station. "If we can take this out, the whole thing goes offline," Evelyn said. Joran hesitated. "That's a big if. This thing is surrounded by fleets, and it's built like a fortress." Evelyn straightened. "Then we do what we've always done. We hit them where they least expect it." Hours later, the War Council convened in the strategy room. Resistance leaders from across the sector joined via holographic projection. The tension was palpable as Evelyn explained the stakes. "The Sargathians aren't just trying to subjugate us, they want to erase us," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "This weapon gives them the power to destroy entire worlds. If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to fight for." One of the leaders, a grizzled veteran named Commander Arlen, crossed his arms. "And how exactly do you plan to get past their defenses?" "This is suicide." Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. "It's not suicide if it works. We've identified a weak point in their power grid. A small strike team can infiltrate the station, plant charges, and disable the weapon." "And if you fail?" another leader asked. Evelyn's expression hardened. "Then we'll die fighting, but at least we'll have tried. Sitting back and waiting for them to destroy us isn't an option." The room fell silent. Finally, Commander Arlen nodded reluctantly. "You've got my support." Preparations moved quickly. The strike team was assembled: Evelyn, Joran, Renevalis, and 2 demolition experts. The rest of the resistance fleet would stage a diversionary attack to draw the Sargathian forces away from Exterminus. As the team boarded the Shadowfall, Evelyn addressed them. "This mission isn't just about us. It's about every human who's ever lost someone to the Sargathians. We're their last hope. Let's make it count." Rena gave a tight nod, her earlier doubts replaced by steely resolve. Joran patted her shoulder as they took their seats. "Stick with me, Valis. We'll make it back in one piece." She smirked. "You'd better not slow me down, Malik." The Shadowfall emerged from hyperspace on the edge of the Sargathian defense grid. The main resistance fleet launched their attack, engaging the enemy's ships in a chaotic battle. Using the diversion, the Shadowfall slipped past the outer perimeter and approached Exterminus. The colossal weapon loomed before them, its surface bristling with turrets and glowing with energy conduits. "Scanning for an entry point," Joran said, his fingers flying over the console. "There," Evelyn said, pointing to a maintenance hatch near the power core. "That's our way in." The team suited up and exited the ship, navigating the surface of Exterminus with magnetic boots. The void of space was silent around them, but inside their helmets, Evelyn's voice came through the comms. "Stay close. We don't have much time." They breached the hatch and slipped into the station's labyrinthine interior. The corridors were eerily quiet, but the hum of machinery and the distant clatter of Sargathian patrols kept them on edge. "Plant the charges here," Evelyn instructed, pointing to a junction of power conduits. As the demolition experts worked, Rena kept watch. Her pulse quickened when she spotted movement down the corridor. "Contacts!" she hissed. Sargathian soldiers rounded the corner, their plasma rifles blazing. The team dove for cover, returning fire in quick, coordinated bursts. "We need more time!" one of the demolitionists shouted. "Then buy it!" Evelyn barked, taking down a soldier with a precise shot. The firefight was brutal and intense, but the team held their ground. Finally, the charges were set. "Detonators ready," the demolitionist said. "Good," Evelyn replied. "Now let's move." They retreated toward the extraction point, but the station's alarm blared, and more Sargathians swarmed toward them. "This is getting worse by the second," Joran shouted, firing as they ran. Evelyn gritted her teeth. "Keep moving!" The team reached the outer hull just as the charges detonated. The explosion rocked the station, sending a ripple of energy cascading through its structure. Alarms wailed as the lights flickered and dimmed. "We did it!" Rena exclaimed, a rare grin breaking across her face. But their victory was short-lived. As the Shadowfall approached to pick them up, a Sargathian battlecruiser appeared on the horizon, its weapons locking onto the frigate. "They're targeting us!" Joran yelled. Evelyn made a split-second decision. "Joran, get the others aboard. I'll draw their fire." "Are you insane?" he shouted. "Do it, Captain! That's an order!" Before he could protest further, Evelyn launched herself toward the station's surface, firing at the cruiser to divert its attention. "General!" Rena's voice cracked over the comms, but Evelyn didn't respond. As the Shadowfall sped away, Evelyn continued her desperate gambit, her heart pounding as the cruiser's weapons focused on her. She didn't stop firing until a massive explosion engulfed the station, consuming her and the Sargathian weapon in a blinding burst of light. Hours later, aboard Sanctuary, the Resistance fleet returned, battered but victorious. The news of Evelyn's sacrifice spread quickly, sparking a renewed sense of purpose among the fighters. In the command center, Joran stood silently, staring at a small hollow image of Evelyn and Lucas. "She gave us a chance," Rena said, her voice trembling. "We won't waste it." Joran nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "No, we won't." The Resistance had lost their leader, but her legacy burned brighter than ever. Evelyn's sacrifice had delivered a crippling blow to the Sargathians, and humanity's fight for survival would continue, with hope reignited.